The late afternoon sun beat down on Lucas's perfectly manicured backyard, turning the lush green grass into a blinding stage. The air hummed with the sound of forced laughter and the sizzle of grilling meat, a soundtrack to my personal brand of dread. Every year, Lucas's family, the Athertons, hosted their summer gathering, and every year, attending felt like stepping into a minefield blindfolded. This year was no different, except the apprehension felt heavier, a physical weight pressing down on my chest the moment I pulled the car onto their street. I did this for Mason. Only for Mason. My son, who was vibrating with a nervous excitement in the back seat, had been asking to see his cousins for weeks. He missed them. He missed the easy camaraderie, the sprawling space to run, the feeling of belonging to that side of the family, the one with the big house and the perfect parties. I'd said no initially. After everything, the thought of facing Claire Atherton and the rest of the clan felt like volunteering for public dissection. But then Mason had looked at me with those big, earnest eyes and said, "But Mom, I don't want them to forget me." And just like that, my resolve crumbled. A mother's guilt is a potent weapon. So here we were, arriving 20 minutes late, a strategy one hoped would allow us to slip in unnoticed. It didn't work. The moment we stepped through the ornate side gate, the heads turned. It felt less like walking into a party and more like walking onto a stage where I hadn't rehearsed my lines. Lucas spotted us immediately. He plastered on his friendly grin, the one that never quite reached his eyes when they landed on me. Sunglasses still on, of course. He strode over, all practiced ease. "Hey, you guys made it," he boomed, kneeling down to give Mason an overly enthusiastic high five. "There's the man. Go on, buddy, find Thomas, he's got the burgers going." He didn't look at me. Just a quick, sweeping glance that dismissed me entirely before turning back to his conversation. Like I was the hired help who just dropped off the package. And then there was Claire. She was on the elevated patio, nursing a tall glass of something red and frosty, her eyes, sharp and assessing, locked onto mine over the rim. A tight, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, the kind that promised pain. She didn't wave at me, just lifted a manicured hand towards Mason, her expression softening into a practiced, doting grandma look. As I watched, she turned to the woman next to her, Samantha, Lucas's aunt, a notorious gossip with eyes that missed nothing. I saw Claire lean in and whisper something, and Samantha's head swiveled towards me, her eyes narrowing with overt judgment. I forced a smile that felt brittle enough to shatter. Pretending not to hear, not to see, pretending it didn't sting. It had become a second skin during my marriage to Lucas. It's amazing how much cruelty you can absorb when you think staying quiet is the price of peace, or in my case now, the price of your child seeing his family. I steered Mason towards where the kids were gathering, trying to merge into the background. Mason, sensing my tension, gripped my hand a little tighter. We found a relatively quiet corner near a large oak tree, away from the main cluster of adults. I just needed a moment to breathe, to remind myself why I was here. For him. All for him. A few minutes later, Penelope, Lucas's cousin, ambled over. She was always the least outwardly hostile, but there was a wariness about her, caught between her family's loyalty and perhaps a flicker of independent thought. "Hey, Scarlett," she said, her smile a little uncertain. "Haven't seen you in ages. Mason's gotten so big." "Hi, Penelope," I replied, managing a softer smile. "Good to see you." "Yeah, he's growing like a weed." Penelope glanced around, lowering her voice slightly. "It's a full house this year." An understatement. It felt like the whole neighborhood had turned out, and every single one of them knew my history with Lucas, or at least, the version Claire and Lucas had carefully curated. Samantha, meanwhile, had drifted closer, drawn by the scent of potential gossip. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "So, Scarlett," she began, her voice pitched just loud enough, "still managing everything on your own? It must be terribly difficult. Lucas always said you struggled with organization." The implication hung in the air, not just organization, but life itself. It was a small cut, but the blade was sharp. I felt the familiar heat rise in my cheeks, but I held it together. Just breathe. For Mason. Just breathe. I watched Mason tentatively join a game of tag near the sprinkler. He was still a little shy around his cousins after not seeing them often, but he was laughing, his small body a blur of motion against the bright green lawn. That ache in my chest eased just a fraction. This was why I was here. This fleeting moment of normal, of connection for him. Seeing his happiness was the only currency that mattered, the only thing that made this calculated exposure worth it. Being a single mom wasn't the struggle Samantha casually mentioned. It was a relentless, exhausting marathon run on empty. There were days I didn't know how we'd make it work. How to afford the unexpected car repair and school supplies in the same month. How to be both the comforting presence and the firm disciplinarian when I was bone-tired. How to silence the persistent voice of doubt that whispered I wasn't enough. Lucas and his family, with their sprawling house and effortless abundance, had no concept of this reality. In their eyes, my struggles were a moral failing, proof that I wasn't cut out for their world, or even the one I inhabited now. They saw the messiness of survival and labeled it incompetence. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Audrey. Here. The text was short, urgent. My sister, my fiercest protector. I told her I was coming, and she'd been livid. Jessa, she'd said, my family still called me Jessa. They don't get to make you feel small twice. Don't give them the satisfaction. But I had. And now she was here or nearby. Yeah. By the big oak. I typed back quickly, my fingers trembling slightly. Please don't cause a scene. Her reply was instant. Wouldn't dream of it. Just breathing the same air makes me want to commit felonies. Keeping eyes on you. Knowing she was close, a silent guardian angel, gave me a tiny flicker of strength. The small talk around me continued, a symphony of polite questions laced with subtle judgment. Samantha was now talking loudly to another woman about the importance of a child having a stable family unit, her eyes darting pointedly towards me. Uncle Thomas, nursing a beer, chuckled at something Claire said from the patio, his laughter booming across the yard. It felt like they were building a case against me, piece by insidious piece, using their whispered assumptions and loaded compliments as evidence. Mason seems energetic, Claire called down from the patio at one point, her voice sweet but carrying. Must be all those unconventional snacks you give him. Kids are so sensitive to chemicals these days. My stomach clenched. I bought organic when I could afford it, packed his lunches with fruit and vegetables. This was just another jab, another way to imply I was failing him, probably linking it back to her narrative that I was irresponsible and chaotic. I just nodded, pretending to fuss with the edge of my blouse. Don't engage. Don't give her the reaction she craves. But the barbs were relentless. They were like tiny poison darts, finding their mark one after another. Every smile felt like a score being tallied, every casual comment a judgment. I felt the heat in my face intensifying, my breath becoming shallow. My hands, resting on the back of a patio chair, were shaking. I desperately wanted to just grab Mason and run, but the thought of him seeing my distress, of letting Claire steal this moment of joy from him, rooted me to the spot. I told myself I'd stay for an hour. Just 60 minutes. Let Mason have his fun, then we'd make our excuses and leave. I started a silent countdown in my head. 58, 57. Claire's voice, suddenly louder, cut through the general chatter. She had everyone's attention now, her glass held aloft like a toast. She looked directly at me, her eyes cold and hard, the polite smile completely gone. There was no preamble, no disguised jab this time, just the raw, ugly accusation, delivered for the benefit of every single person in that backyard. Honestly, she announced, her voice dripping with disdain, some people are just parasites, always looking for an easy ride. She was a terrible wife, always spending Lucas's money, and frankly, she's a terrible mother if she thinks she can just coast by on child support. A real gold digger. The world tilted. The laughter died. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the backyard. I could feel every eye on me. The heat in my face was searing now, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I was visibly trembling. I was standing naked in the middle of their perfect world, drenched in their contempt. And Lucas? He was watching, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, but he said nothing. Absolutely nothing. The silence was absolute, heavy, and thick with unspoken judgment. It pressed in on me, stealing the air from my lungs. I could feel their eyes, like physical weights, pinning me to the spot. Gold digger. Terrible mother. The words echoed in the sudden void, louder than Claire had even shouted them. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never surface. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to hide, to pull Mason into the car and just drive until the perfect houses and judgmental stares were a distant memory. My eyes found Mason again. He wasn't playing anymore. He wasn't looking at his cousins or at me. He was walking, slowly but purposefully, towards the center of the yard, towards the patio where Claire stood, still holding her glass, looking imperious even in the awkward silence. He was wearing his bright blue Spider-Man t-shirt, a splash of innocent color in the sea of muted adult tones and tension. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Samantha looked like she might choke on her own gossip. Uncle Thomas, his earlier chuckle long gone, just stared, his mouth slightly open. Lucas hadn't moved, his eyes fixed on me, a look now unreadable behind the sunglasses. I watched Mason approach a low, white decorative garden wall. He paused for just a second, then, with a small heave, pulled himself up to sit on it. His feet, encased in little dinosaur print sneakers that left tiny footprints in the dirt, dangled above the grass. He just sat there, small and still, blinking out at the assembled adults. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. A nervous little giggle from somewhere near the grill. Was he going to sing a song? Tell a joke? Kids did things like that. Maybe he was just seeking attention, disrupting the uncomfortable silence in a harmless way. Claire even managed a strained, expectant look, as if waiting for him to perform some cute antic that would diffuse the tension she had created and bring the focus back to her control. Mason didn't sing. He didn't tell a joke. He didn't even look upset or angry. He just looked serious, like a tiny, unexpected judge presiding over a very flawed court. He turned his head slightly and looked directly at Claire. His voice, when he spoke, was clear, not loud, but everyone heard it in the absolute quiet. "Grandma Claire," he said. Claire tilted her head, a patronizing smile starting to form. "Yes, sweetie. I have something," Mason continued, his gaze unwavering, "that Dad told me not to tell you." Just like that, the air crackled. The nervous titters died instantly. The smiles vanished. It wasn't a cute kid moment. It was something else. Something heavy. Lucas, across the yard, visibly stiffened. His head snapped towards Mason, the casual posture he'd held moments before replaced by rigid alarm. I saw him take a step forward, his hand reaching out reflexively. "All right, buddy." Lucas's voice was tight, forced casualness failing him entirely. "That's enough. Come on down now. Don't make a scene." He was trying to wave Mason off the wall, his grin back, but it was brittle fake. He looked like he was trying to talk down a jumper, not his 6-year-old son. But Mason didn't budge. He didn't look away from Claire. He didn't look at Lucas. He just sat there, a small, immovable object in the center of their carefully constructed world. "It's not a scene," Mason said, his voice still quiet but firm. "It's the truth." The silence that followed was even deeper than before. The kind of silence that screams. Lucas froze mid-step. Claire's face had gone pale under her tan. She looked at Lucas, then back at Mason, a flicker of something, fear, crossing her features. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the silence. I didn't know what Mason was about to say, what secrets Lucas might have burdened him with, but I knew, with a sickening certainty, that the carefully balanced world Lucas and Claire had built was about to crack wide open, and it was my quiet, brave son who was holding the hammer. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. Every eye was on Mason, perched on that low wall like a small, accidental king on a makeshift throne. Lucas's face was a mask of pure panic, his forced smile gone, replaced by something ugly and desperate. Claire looked torn between fury and disbelief. My own heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. What had Lucas told him? What burden had he placed on our child's small shoulders? Mason took a deep breath, his little chest expanding under the Spider-Man shirt. He looked not just at Claire anymore, but scanned the faces of the adults staring at him. Dad says, Mason began, his voice steady, cutting through the tension like a small, sharp knife, that Mommy takes all the money from him. And that's why we can't have a bigger house and new toys all the time. He said she's mean because she makes me eat vegetables and go to bed early. And he said she doesn't love me as much as he does, and that she lies a lot. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. It wasn't just a few people now. It was widespread. Faces crumpled in shock. Some hands flew to mouths. Samantha looked genuinely horrified, her eyes wide as saucers, the earlier smugness completely wiped away. Uncle Thomas, the man who had been laughing moments ago, visibly recoiled, his face pale, his eyes fixed on Lucas with a look of stunned disbelief. Penelope, near me, let out a small, soft sound of distress and covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes full of a sudden, clear empathy directed at me. But Mason wasn't finished. He spoke the words that twisted the knife, linking directly back to Claire's public accusation. He said, Mason continued, his voice dropping slightly but still clear, that Mommy is a gold digger. And he said I shouldn't tell her he said any of that, because it was a secret between men. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Gold digger. Lucas had been poisoning our son's mind with the same narrative his mother used to humiliate me, drawing Mason into a web of secrets and lies. It was a calculated, cruel move, using our child as a weapon. Claire's momentary shock dissipated, replaced by a fierce, defensive anger. He's misunderstood, she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly, completely unlike her earlier composed tone. Children exaggerate. Scarlett, what have you told him? You put him up to this. She pointed a trembling finger at me, trying desperately to shift the blame, to regain control of the narrative that was rapidly slipping away. Lucas lunged forward, his face contorted with rage and panic. Mason, get down here. That's enough. You don't know what you're talking about. He was yelling now, his voice hoarse, completely dropping the facade of calm. He reached out, as if to physically silence his son. But Mason pulled back slightly on the wall, just out of reach. He looked at Lucas, his young face etched with a seriousness that was heartbreaking. Yes, I do, Dad, he said, his voice unwavering. You said it. You said Mommy was a gold digger. And you said it was a secret. Lucas froze, his hands suspended in the air. He looked around at the stunned faces of his family. The public humiliation he had just inflicted on me now reflected back onto him 100-fold, delivered by his own son. He opened his mouth, then closed it, speechless for the first time. Claire stood beside him, fuming, but even she seemed momentarily silenced by the sheer, undeniable truth in Mason's simple words. In that moment, standing there with Audrey's supportive presence a silent anchor beside me, I felt a complex swirl of emotions. Pain, deep and searing, that Lucas had done this to Mason. Shock at Mason's incredible bravery. But also, a powerful, unexpected sense of validation. They could call me names, they could whisper behind my back. Lucas could lie about why our marriage ended and try to turn our son against me. But here, in front of everyone, the unvarnished truth, the truth I had always known about Lucas's manipulative character, was being spoken. And it wasn't coming from me, the accused gold digger, but from the innocent child caught in the middle. My son, my quiet, thoughtful boy, had just drawn a line in the sand that they could never unsee. The silence that fell after Mason spoke wasn't empty. It was filled with the weight of everything unsaid, everything exposed. Lucas stood frozen, his hands still outstretched towards Mason, his face a picture of bewildered fury. Claire's mouth was open, but no sound came out. Around them, the gathered family members looked like statues, caught mid-action, their expressions ranging from outright shock to awkward embarrassment, and in some cases, a dawning, uncomfortable understanding. Samantha was staring at her shoes. Uncle Thomas was slowly shaking his head, his gaze fixed on the ground. Penelope was watching me, her eyes wet. I knelt beside Mason, who was still perched on the low wall. He looked small again, the brief flash of adult-like determination fading, replaced by the wide, slightly scared eyes of a child who knew he'd done something big, something he wasn't supposed to do. Mason, I whispered, my voice a little shaky, reaching out to touch his knee. You can come down now, honey. He slid off the wall and came to me. I pulled him into a tight hug right there in the middle of the stunned silence. His small arms wrapped around my neck, his heart beating rapidly against my chest. I held him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, grounding myself in his presence. I was still shaking, my face hot with residual humiliation and the shock of what had just happened. But holding him, I felt a surge of something stronger than shame, fierce, protective love and a new kind of resolve hardening in my gut. Audrey was by my side in an instant, her arm wrapping around my shoulders. Her eyes, usually full of fire when it came to Lucas and his family, were now soft with pride mixed with fury. She didn't say anything, but her presence was a solid, comforting weight. "We're leaving," I said, not loudly, but clearly enough for those closest to us to hear. I didn't look at Lucas or Claire. There was nothing left to say to them. Not here, not now. I took Mason's hand, stood up straight, and started walking towards the side gate we'd entered through. Every pair of eyes followed us. I could feel their gaze on my back, drilling into my shoulder blades. It felt like the longest walk of my life. The perfect lawn, the festive decorations, the lingering smell of barbecue. It all felt tainted, unreal. But this time, the stairs didn't make me want to disappear. They felt different. They felt like witnessing, like acknowledgement. They had seen. They had heard. Lucas stood on the patio, arms crossed now, jaw clenched, watching us go. Claire was beside him, her face a thundercloud. They didn't call out. They didn't try to stop us. The time for performance was over, and in the raw aftermath, they seemed incapable of action. They only fought when they were sure of their audience and their control. Mason had taken both away. Just as we reached the gate, stepping onto the quiet street, I heard a voice call out, softer than Claire's earlier shriek, hesitant. "Scarlett?" "Wait." It was Penelope. I paused and turned. She had followed us to the edge of the yard, her face full of concern. She didn't say anything else, just looked at me, then at Mason, a silent apology and understanding passing between us. I gave her a small, tired nod, a gesture that said thank you for seeing, and then we stepped through the gate and closed it behind us. Sliding into the driver's seat of my old car felt like escaping a burning building. Mason climbed into his booster seat in the back, unusually quiet. Audrey got in the passenger side. The air in the car was thick with unspoken emotions. As I pulled away from the curb, leaving the perfect, now shattered backyard behind, Audrey let out a long, shaky breath. "I swear to God," she said, her voice low and fierce, "it took every ounce of self-control I had not to walk over there and do something I'd regret." "I know," I replied, my voice rough, finally letting out the breath I felt I'd been holding for years. We drove in silence for a while, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the distant traffic. I glanced in the rearview mirror at Mason. He was looking out the window, his profile small and still. "Mason," I said softly. He turned his head. "Are you okay, honey?" He nodded, but his eyes looked uncertain. "You were so brave back there," I told him, my voice thick with emotion. So brave." He didn't say anything, just gave me a small, hesitant smile. Audrey reached over and squeezed my arm. "He was incredible, Scarlett. Absolutely incredible." The drive home was quieter than I expected. Mason eventually fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the day's events and his own unexpected bravery. Audrey and I talked in low tones, dissecting the moment, the reactions, the sheer audacity of Lucas and Claire. Audrey was still fuming, listing all the things she wished she'd said. But beneath the anger, there was a sense of awe at Mason and a profound relief that the truth, our truth, had finally seen the light of day, not whispered or denied, but proclaimed by the most innocent voice in the room. Something had irrevocably shifted. The heavy silence we left behind felt lighter than the one that had suffocated me just moments before. The days immediately following the barbecue were strangely quiet. No furious texts from Lucas, no scathing voicemails from Claire. It was the kind of silence that feels deliberate, unnerving. I half expected a barrage of accusations, attempts to rewrite history, or threats about custody. That was their usual playbook. But there was nothing. Just the gentle hum of our own lives resuming, Mason watching cartoons, arguing about socks, the comforting, mundane rhythm of just being us. It felt like the eye of a hurricane after the storm had passed, deceptively calm. But the storm hadn't truly passed. It had just moved indoors, behind closed doors, within the Atherton family circuit. I started hearing whispers. Not directly, of course, but the kind of filtered information that makes its way back to you in the small world of divorce and shared acquaintances. Lucas and Claire were apparently telling the family that Mason was confused, that he'd been coached, that I was using him to cause drama and extract more money. They were working overtime to control the narrative, trying to glue their shattered facade back together with the familiar narrative of my supposed manipulation and instability. It was infuriating, but also strangely less potent than it used to be. Their words didn't have the power they once did because the truth, spoken by Mason, had landed first. Then I got a text message late one evening. It was from Penelope. I stared at the name for a moment, surprised. We hadn't really talked beyond polite hellos in years. "Hey Scarlett," it read. "Hope you guys are okay. Just wanted to say, I was really shaken up by what happened the other day. Mason was, wow. I just wanted you to know I heard him. And I believe him. That took incredible guts. From both of you. Sending you strength." My breath hitched. Penelope. One of them. It was a small thing, just a few sentences in a text message, but it felt monumental. It meant that Mason's words had pierced through the family loyalty, through the carefully constructed lies. It meant that not everyone was buying Lucas and Claire's spin. It meant we weren't completely alone in the truth. I texted her back a simple, "Thank you, Penelope. That means a lot," and felt a knot in my chest loosen just a little. The quiet from Lucas couldn't last forever. It broke a few days later with a phone call. His voice was tight with controlled rage, simmering just beneath the surface. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Scarlett?" he started. No preamble, just launching straight into the attack. "Putting Mason in the middle like that? Coaching him to say things he doesn't understand? You're unbelievable." Here it was. The attempt to gaslight, to blame, to shift responsibility. The familiar script. But this time I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. I didn't try to explain myself. I didn't coach him, Lucas, I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. He spoke his own truth. The truth you told him. He's a child. He's confused. Lucas insisted, his voice rising. He doesn't understand complexities. He understands more than you gave him credit for, I countered, each word calm and firm. He understands when someone he trusts is telling him lies about someone he loves. He understands secrets that hurt. There was a pause on his end, a beat of silence where he clearly wasn't expecting me to stand my ground so firmly. "You're going to ruin things," he threatened, his voice low and dangerous now. "You're going to make this difficult. Maybe Mason shouldn't be around you if this is how you behave." That was the threat. Cut me off from my son. It was his ultimate weapon. For a split second, fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. But then I thought of Mason on that wall, his small face determined, his brave voice cutting through the lies. I thought of carrying the shame and silence for so long. Not anymore. "You listen to me, Lucas," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You are the one who put him in the middle. You are the one who lied to him and told him to keep secrets. You are the one who called me names and tried to turn my son against me. My behavior is finally standing up for myself and my child. Your threats don't work anymore. You want to have a relationship with Mason? It will be based on honesty. You will not lie to him about me. You will not tell him to keep secrets from me. Ever. If you try, I will make things difficult. This isn't about money or drama for me. It's about protecting my son from your manipulation. Do you understand?" He sputtered on the other end, clearly not used to this version of me. I didn't wait for a full response. I had said what I needed to say. I had drawn the line. "Goodbye, Lucas." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling, but not from fear this time. It was from the adrenaline of battle, the kind you feel when you've finally fought back and won a crucial skirmish. The narrative was no longer just theirs to control. The truth was out, and I was finally claiming my voice. A few days after my conversation with Lucas, Claire showed up at my door. It was unexpected. I opened it to find her standing there, not with a delegation or a stern lawyer's letter, but holding a small paper bag from the expensive bakery downtown. The kind of place she used to get Mason's birthday cakes from when we were still married. Her face, usually so composed and sharp, looked uncertain. Shaky even. "Scarlett," she started, her voice hesitant. I came to apologize." I just stood in the doorway, not moving aside to invite her in. The air between us felt thick, charged with everything that had happened. "To me?" I asked, my voice neutral. She hesitated, glancing past me into the house, presumably looking for Mason. "To both of you," she amended, her gaze flicking back to mine, though she seemed more focused on the unseen Mason inside. She held out the bag. "These are the blueberry muffins. From the bakery on Sycamore. Mason likes those, right?" A strange pang went through me. She remembered. Or maybe someone reminded her. Either way, it was a detail she hadn't needed to know for years. "He does," I said, taking the bag. She wrung her hands slightly, a gesture I'd never seen from her. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think I was cruel. I thought I was protecting Lucas. By tearing you down." Her eyes met mine briefly, and for a second, I saw something that looked like regret. "That wasn't right," she murmured, almost to herself. "No, that wasn't right. I see that now. I really do." It wasn't a full admission. It wasn't accountability for the years of subtle jabs and the final, brutal public shaming. But it was something. A crack in the carefully constructed facade of righteousness. I didn't invite her in. Not today. Maybe not ever, in the way things used to be. But I held the bag of muffins. "Actions, Claire," I said quietly, my voice firm but not unkind. "If you want to show you've changed, it starts with actions, not just words." She nodded slowly, accepting the boundary. As she turned to leave, she paused, looking back at me. "He's brave. Your son." A fierce, protective pride swelled in my chest. "He's mine," I replied, a small smile finally touching my lips. "Of course he is." Later that night, after Mason had devoured 2 blueberry muffins and was tucked into bed, he looked up at me, his brown eyes serious. "Is Grandma Claire still mad?" he asked. "No, honey," I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "I don't think she's mad anymore. I think she's thinking." He tilted his head, processing this complex adult idea. Did I do something bad? The question was soft, laced with lingering worry. I looked him right in the eye, making sure he saw and felt the absolute truth in my words. "No, Mason. You did something incredibly brave. You told the truth. And telling the truth is never bad." He nodded slowly, the worry easing from his face. "I was scared," he admitted. "I know, sweetie," I said, pulling him into a gentle hug. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do it even when you are. That's what makes you strong." Holding him, rocking him gently, I felt it. The shift. The most powerful part of that day wasn't Claire's stunned silence or Lucas's exposed panic. It was Mason, perched on that wall, choosing truth over silence. He believed his voice mattered. He believed he had the right to speak up when something was wrong, when someone he loved was being hurt and lied about. And I realized, with a clarity that took my breath away, that he didn't just do that for me. He did it for himself. He needed them to know that he saw. That the games, the lies, the cruel words, they didn't hide the truth from him. He wasn't just a prop in their drama. He was a witness, a person with his own feelings and his own voice. I had spent so long trying to shield him by taking the hits myself, by swallowing the insults, by staying quiet and trying to be small. I thought I was protecting him from the ugliness. But maybe in trying to protect him from seeing the truth, I was also teaching him that silence was the answer, that his feelings didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. Mason taught me otherwise. Kids feel the shifts in the air, the tension, the unspoken things. And sometimes they need permission, or maybe just the courage, to articulate what they see. Since that day, things aren't magically perfect. Lucas still tries to spin things, still tries to exert control where he can, but his power over me is broken. I no longer fear his judgment or his family's. Claire hasn't transformed into a perfect mother-in-law, but there's a new, fragile dynamic there. Any interaction now, however strained, feels more real, because the biggest lie is out in the open. The shame I carried for so long, the shame of being divorced, of struggling, of not being enough in their eyes, it's still a scar, maybe, but it no longer weighs me down. That shame was never mine. It was theirs. A burden they tried to place on me, and for too long, I let them. That day, on that perfect lawn, when my son stood on that wall and spoke his truth, he didn't just defend me. He gave me permission. Permission to put the shame down. Permission to stop being small. Permission to finally, truly speak for myself. It's a strange feeling, finding your voice after years of swallowing it. It's shaky at first, uncertain. But with every boundary set, with every truth spoken, it gets stronger. And the most amazing part? Once you take that power back, once you stop shrinking to fit into someone else's narrative, no one can ever take it away from you again. Not an ex-husband, not a former mother-in-law, not anyone.